Let's talk about men trauma dumping on women and calling it being vulnerable. Trauma dumping refers to the act of sharing traumatic experiences or deep emotional burden with someone else, often abruptly and without their consent.
Hey, bodybuilders?
Oh yeah?
Bodybuilders?
Yeah.
I like skinny, scrawny guys.
How about multimillionaires? How about 8 inches and thick? How about talented? How about loving and respectful? I lost my wife 10 weeks ago. 21 years faithful. My daughter committed suicide 3 weeks ago.
Oh shit.
13. She was faster than me at 12, and I run a 6-minute mile. My testimony, I'm nothing but pure, and I ask you if you want to be in the YouTube channel. And you like scrawny guys.
I know he trauma dump on us like that. Damn.
Let's talk about the short video clip you just watched. The lady in that video says she preferred slim men, but the guy himself is a bodybuilder, so obviously she doesn't want him. That's one negative strike for him. He wasn't happy with that. He was trying to convince her, okay, is that the only thing you're looking out for? How about the person's character? That was him auditioning that he's a good person. How about the man's character? Are you just looking at the person's physical looks? He went on to talk about how he's been in a faithful relationship for over 21 years, and he also told her that he lost his wife 10 weeks ago and his daughter took her life 3 weeks ago. I don't know if those information was necessary. He called it his testimony. He also said he was trying to get her on his YouTube channel. For me, he came off as being manipulative. She already told you that I'm not interested because you're a bodybuilder, you're not my kind of person, and you started auditioning and trying to make her see reasons why she should come on your YouTube channel. And then you went on to bring up emotional stuff. Probably you're looking for sympathy. Maybe he was thinking those things might make her have a change of mind. And it's the way she quickly realizes what he was doing, because at the end of it, we heard her use the word trauma dumping. That was basically what he was doing. I know some people might argue and say maybe he's just an emotional dad, just trying to talk about the trauma, the things he's going through at that point in time. That could also be a possibility, but I don't really see it that way, because I don't see the need for him to talk about all that, because he was trying to convince someone. And we also heard he was disappointed at the end of it.
So I was just watching a video from this woman, and she was talking about how she had been dating this guy. They had been on about 5 or 6 dates. She said that he came over to her place, I guess on maybe like a Friday, and he was at her place the entire weekend. Over that weekend, he was telling her about some of his deepest, darkest secrets, about really opening up to her, even telling her about some of the issues he was having with his father and his siblings. And she's thinking that over this weekend, they're really bonding. And so eventually he finally leaves. And when he leaves, he texts her back and he's like, you're a really great person. I really enjoyed spending time with you. But if I'm being honest, I've also been dating this other woman and I want to see where that goes. So I wish you the best of luck, but basically like you're not going to see me again. So the woman is understandably upset. And she was just like, I can't believe that you sat up in here, trauma dumped all over me, and now you're trying to tell me that you want to go see how it goes with somebody else.
Signs of trauma dumping: telling the same story repeatedly, sharing graphic, explicit details about the trauma, bringing up past trauma frequently and inappropriately, a lack of interest in other people's opinion or point of view about their experience, choosing listeners who are beholden to them in some way, not asking about others' lives or giving a chance to share their emotions, posting details about traumatic experience on social media. Some people out there don't see trauma dumping to be an issue. They call it venting. To them, it's like, oh, someone that has been looking for an outlet and they've decided to vent. But I tell you, there's a difference between venting and trauma dumping. Let's talk about it. Let's have a look at the practical examples of healthy venting versus trauma dumping. With healthy venting, both people have a chance to vent. Talking about it helps in finding a solution. Venting doesn't take up the entire conversation. The venter owns up to their own part in the issues. Both people leave the conversation feeling better. With trauma dumping, the dumper overshares at an inappropriate time. They don't leave space for the other person to talk. They're not interested in solutions or advice. The entire conversation is focused on the trauma. The dumpee leaves the conversation feeling drained, helpless, or frustrated. To some ladies out there, trauma dumping is considered a red flag. Should trauma dumping be considered a red flag? I know when it comes to red flags and what you're looking out for in a relationship, it all depends on the individual. Here is why trauma dumping is considered a red flag. Firstly, it can be emotionally draining for the listener. Hearing graphic details of someone else's trauma can be triggering, especially if they have experienced similar events themselves. Secondly, trauma dumping can be a form of manipulation. By sharing shocking or upsetting details, the person trauma dumping might be seeking to control the conversation, gain sympathy, or avoid taking responsibility for their own actions. Finally, trauma dumping can hinder the healing process for both parties. For the person trauma dumping, constantly reliving their trauma can prevent them from moving forward. For the listener, the burden of absorbing someone else's pain can make it difficult to focus on their own emotional well-being.
Or some like red flags you would pick up more easily now.
I feel like when they start like opening up to you way too quick.
That's crazy though. I just told you that I'll go to hang out with girls and like I can't help it.
Oh, and you're walking red flag.
I've heard that before, but like I never believed it.
Unless you're a good person. Oh, and I think you're a good person, but I feel like bad people do that on purpose. So like they make the girl feel like, wow, this person is opening up to me. He really trusts me. And so it makes you be vulnerable with them. But to them, they're just doing that to every single girl they're talking to. I feel like that's what he did to me. And so I was able to open up to him, which I regret so much because that shit hurts. Like thinking about it, I feel like he lied about a lot of shit. When you start catching like little lies, like even the tiniest lies, they add up.
I have a question for you though.
Yeah.
You said that he lied a lot.
All of them.
If they all lied a lot and you caught them lying, why did you keep staying with them?
Because they would gaslight the shit out of me. See,
Trauma dumping can be used as a manipulative tactics for some men. So some men out there, they use it to gauge the lady they are about to prey on. Let me say this. Some men innocently share their trauma without even thinking about it. So don't think that everyone that has trauma dumped you in the past or is trauma dumping you at the moment might have an ulterior motive. Some people might just be doing it from an innocent place. Maybe they just have a lot of things bottled in, and at that point in time they feel safe to share with you. I tell you, some people, they use it as a manipulative tactics to get to the woman they want to be in a relationship with. Trauma dumping can be manipulative because someone can use it to gain control of a conversation, elicit sympathy or pity, and make the listener feel obligated to help them.
Narcissists almost always trauma dump early on in the love bombing phase. And I'm going to talk about why they do it and why it's a red flag. Now, there are other personalities that have a tendency to trauma dump early on, like people with anxious attachment styles, someone with ASD might do this, and someone who is experiencing CPTSD and lacks boundaries and is potentially dating from a place of being unhealed. Trauma dumping early on shows a lack of boundaries, both on the side of the person who is trauma dumping and towards the person they are dumping on. Now, narcissists and similar predators will trauma dump for a few reasons. Number one is that they're setting up that victim narrative. They are always the victim, they are always being persecuted, and they deserve your sympathy and empathy in their mind. Which leads into number two. They often will trauma dump early on because they are testing you for your empathy and sympathy levels. If they weave this victim story early on, they talk about their difficult childhood, they talk about their difficult relationship, their exes are all crazy, whatever it is, their parents were crazy, their parents abused them, they went through some terrible trauma. They will then cite that for the rest of the relationship so that you will excuse their bad behavior under the guise that they are simply acting out, potentially, because of their trauma. And what they really need is your understanding. They want to know that you are someone who they can manipulate through guilt, through your empathy, through your own good character, and through how forgiving you are. The third reason that narcissists and similar predators will trauma dump early on in the relationship is because they're hoping that you are going to share something deep and personal about yourself, about your own life and your own traumas, so that they can start making that mental map to understand how they can best manipulate and control you down the line. Which leads into number four. Narcissists will often trauma dump early on in the relationship because they are testing your boundaries and your vulnerability. If they share some kind of terrible childhood trauma with you really early on and you share right back, that shows them two things. Firstly, that you lack boundaries, that you're going to share this level of deep personal information with a complete stranger easily and early on. And secondly, that you're vulnerable, which is one of the reasons that it's important that you don't trauma dump early on if you're coming from a place of CPTSD or anxious attachment or something like that. Because when you do that with someone that you don't know, if that person is a narcissist or a similar predator, they are going to be attracted to that because they're going to see you as an easy target. This is why oftentimes narcissists and these kinds of similar abusers come to us and we get into relationships with them when we're vulnerable, when we're going through something. Because when we are vulnerable, we're never more likely to sweep those red flags under the carpet and be susceptible to the love bombing. Now, does this mean that every person that trauma dumps early on is a narcissist? No, of course not. Like I said before, there are other personalities that have a potential to trauma dump early on. However, when we're looking at narcissistic behavior and potentially looking back over our own narcissistic relationship and at the red flags that we missed or swept under the carpet because we were vulnerable, it is important to note that this is a red flag and why. And when we're looking at avoiding these types of relationships in the future, it's about recognizing the accumulation of red flags and also protecting ourselves, upholding our own boundaries, and making sure that we're not making ourselves vulnerable by trauma dumping early on. And that if someone does trauma dump all over us early on, that we don't immediately just dump right back onto them without having built some kind of trust or rapport. And if you're new here, I'm a narcissistic abuse educator. Make sure you hit follow and you can book a session with me through the link in my bio.
Ladies, if you're in the habit of trauma dumping on men, beware of narcissistic men because they can easily use the information you share with them against you.
You cannot speak your truth and be vulnerable with a narcissist. They do everything to try to convince you that you can be vulnerable with them and tell them all your secrets, your childhood trauma, etc. But they will at some point use it against you, and it will be so hurtful because of how personal it is. Narcissists take innocent words and turn them into ugly things. They will tell people your secrets to make themselves look good and try to make you look bad or crazy. They will call you names during arguments that have to do with the trauma that you've told them so that you're back in that vulnerable place and they can win the argument. These are sick and twisted people that do not have a conscience. They don't have the empathy to say, wow, it was so hard for her to open up to me, so I am going to treat her with dignity and respect. They are transactional people, and they see this as a bargaining chip that they now have that they can put into their pocket and use later when they need it. That is why you are called narcissistic supply when you are vulnerable with the narcissist, because you are supplying them with the stuff that they need to cause drama and ruin your life. That's what they love to do. They thrive in abusive settings. Do not tell the narcissist anything that you wouldn't want your grandma to know or somebody on Twitter to know. If you are forced to interact with these people and you can't go no contact, you can tell them things about yourself without diving into your insecurities and your trauma. You have to keep it surface level with these people because they do not care. If they're mad or they have rage against you, all bets are off. There is no rapport. There is no niceties at that point. They will use everything that they have against you.
The reason why I want to talk about this is because there are so many times on the internet where a man will jump on here and say, or try to make women feel like our gifts, what we bring to the table, like is just cooking and cleaning. Like all we do is domestic things. All we do is laundry and dishes. I don't think that enough men realize that the softness, the communication, the vulnerability, our nurturing spirit, our ability to I just feel like he took advantage of her feminine gifts, but then you want to go and try to see how it goes with some other girl. If that other girl was so special, why didn't you trauma dump all over her? Why didn't you tell her about your daddy issues? Why didn't you tell her about the issues you're having with your siblings? It's like, he was so close to getting it, but he didn't really get it. Like, if you really wanted somebody who was a well-rounded person, the girl who you spent the weekend with, that's who you want. You want somebody who you could be, you know, your highest and also be your lowest with, and they can still see, you know, amazing things in you. But for whatever reason, he threw this girl to the side. When it's like, some of these men, they will use you as their therapist. They will go to anybody except a therapist. Anybody but a counselor. Anybody but somebody's therapy couch. And I think it's crazy how they always minimize our gifts, but they take advantage of it. Have you ever been in a situation where a man expected you to heal him, expected you to be his therapist? It's like, you don't realize that that is a gift that some women possess. It's not, every woman can't do that. Every woman couldn't even do it for him. He let her help him heal and then went on to go give somebody else the gift of his presence. Like, some of these men, they take women and our gifts for granted. They try to make you feel like all you could ever be is a cook, a cleaner, and a maid. But there are so many other gifts that we have that they know they utilize and they benefit from.